Hello, and welcome to F1 Into the Barrier with me, George Close, reviewing the Japanese Grand Prix. And it was an interesting Grand Prix, and first up I want to point out that I have a new hat. This is a Lewis Hamilton 2007, why he's wearing the number 2 in this instance, 2007 rookie season cap. And it's very, very fitting because Kimi Antonelli, who really everyone thought was the number 2 driver, implied by George Russell's apparent superiority. Kimi Antonelli has gone and won his second Grand Prix in a row, and he took his second pole position in a row. This championship is well open, ladies and gentlemen. Again, George was a bit unlucky at points in the weekend, but luck is a huge part of championships. Now, we're 3 races in. We've got a big gap. There's a huge amount of time. There's 22 races this year after 2 were cut out of Bahrain and Saudi. There is a huge amount of time when the lead is going to change. And if McLaren have anything to say about it, it may change even more times, with Oscar Piastri also putting in a very, very good performance. And it was his first performance because it's the first time that he has taken the start lights after his incident in Melbourne and unfortunately reliability issues that affected them last time out in China. Now, quickly on qualifying, I want to be very quick. Kimi Antonelli looked like the quicker driver of the 2 for Mercedes. Very impressed. And Max Verstappen was out-qualified by Hadjar, I think, again, is an interesting thing to point out there. That does not happen very often. Max is not very happy with the car at the moment, but not good when your teammate out-qualifies you, regardless when you're in the same machinery. But first up, we are going to talk about the start. And Kimi Antonelli going backwards. Again, looks like he got wheel spin in the second phase. Ferrari had good starts. We saw Leclerc manage to jump forward. We saw Hamilton manage to make a bit of a step forward. But the big surprise was obviously Oscar Piastri in the McLaren, who got a very good launch. They'd slightly tweaked the starting procedure. They had slightly longer to wait on the line before the light started. You'll have noticed McLaren, this race, as was feared by Ferrari earlier in the course of free practice and qualifying, it looks like McLaren have made a big step up, and they do have the Mercedes power unit. So an interesting start. We had George Russell making some progress. But now let's talk about some drivers. So Kimi Antonelli, the whole of the race. He was quick. He was fortunate at the Bearman safety car, inescapably. But he was already closing at that point on George, who had pitted just before and unfortunately wasn't very lucky with the time in the safety car. But he was quick. He led from the front. He built a gap over the McLaren. But yes, there was some serious overspeed there. Noticing when he just blasted past Lewis when he wasn't there. Now, listen, the engine deployment can make that look sometimes more exaggerated, but it was pretty early on and it was, noticeable just how easily he breezed past. An interesting 3-way fight with Lando and Charles towards the beginning, and they were all running really close. Lewis was lurking in the back, waiting to make his gain forward, saving his tyres, allowed him to go longer, allowed him to benefit from the safety car. But it was interesting watching those guys race really close, and this is what they were saying in commentary. They can race, and you can follow much closer behind for longer. But we'll come on to this kind of closing speed where the regs need to be tweaked a little bit. And very quickly, incredibly impressed with Kimi Antonelli, driver of the day. He is the youngest person to lead an F1 championship now. I think doubling up on the win and quali is just a huge boost and a bit of a psychological dent for George. I'm interested to see what happens when we come back in May for the next race. It's going to be really interesting to see the mindset of both drivers, and at what point does Kimi think and realise and embrace more that he is in a championship. How will he rise to the pressure? I'm unsure. And same for George. It's going to be the first time that George is seriously in a championship battle. He's always been able to perform and get podiums over the last few years, but is this the first time we're going to have to see that mentally from him and how he approaches that? On George, I thought, he had a good race overall, but would be disappointed to have not ultimately got the move on Charles at the end. Although he obviously lost the place with some engine derating issues. That was not great to see. And that's the bit in F1 that, with the current regs, I'm not so keen on, is some of the derating engine management. I enjoy it when they're racing really close together, and we saw Charles and Lewis have that really good close battle. But when it's a breeze past, we saw Max give a sarcastic ways to Gasly when he breezed past as well. That's the bit I'm a bit unsure on. But George, I think given the unluckiness with the time in the safety car, the fact that he didn't feel quite so on top of it clearly as Antonelli this weekend, 4th is not terrible. He had a points advantage going into this weekend. Could have been worse, and he did manage to get the pass on Lewis when he needed to as well. So not hugely concerned, but he would have wanted to finish higher. I think Mercedes' main concern, of course, is going to be McLaren, though. And that pit wall didn't work. They entirely went off, didn't it? So not sure what happened there with their pit wall when they lost all power. But I thought from Piastri, it was a very measured drive. It was a very typical Piastri drive. Very measured, built the gap when he needed to, unflustered, thought he could maybe go long, and felt actually that he might be able to fend off the Mercedes for a while. And that's interesting, right? Because they have the same engine, feeling quite confident that if he was in the right place at the right time, he could have fended off the Mercedes for longer. And it's very clear that McLaren taken a big step up. And Lando had a reasonably good showing. He definitely didn't luck out with the safety car, but he got past Lewis. We'll come on to him saying how he got past Lewis, and ultimately the latter move was a good one, but the first time he got breezed past again. Some engine management issues there clearly factoring into the equation. Of course, the big moment of the race was Bearman's crash. We've got some facts for you. It's 306 kilometers an hour. There was a 45 kilometer per hour speed difference going into Spoon Corner. Hit the wall at 50G. That's a big crash. Big crash. Didn't have much opportunity to slow down. Suffered a right knee contusion. Amazing how quick the x-rays were. But Haas generally, I think, can be reasonably pleased because Ocon got more points. Bearman came away, as I say, injured, but doesn't look like it's a long-term injury. Komatsu was very commendable to Bortoleto, actually, and didn't go in hard on him. Apparently, he'd been going through the same corner at the same speed the previous lap, so they did know about the speed he'd be going. The lap before, it was a 20 kilometer hour over speed, but with the engine deploying, the engine boost, that's what Bearman suffered from. Apparently, he's quite harsh on himself and thought he should have done better, but I don't know. I like the Haas outfit. They've massively punching at the moment. I think Komatsu's done very, very well as team principal and protecting his drive as well. On the Bearman crash, though, Lewis coming out fourth was interesting because everyone thought he was going to come out second. Looks like he got slightly boxed in by Verstappen to lose some time, and also came out of the pits 20 kilometers per hour slower than other rivals also coming out of the pits. So they'll be interesting. We'll see if there's some articles that come out on that. I suppose that was there more to it. Did he just not have the battery deployment? And it does sound like that was a problem for Lewis over the course of the race, was issues with battery deployment, which might explain why he drifted back a little bit at the key moment and got passed by Charles. I will say, even with that, Charles did look the quicker racer all weekend. They qualified very close together, which I think we're going to see. That gap in qualies got less for certain, but Charles is just such a fluid racer and can drive more on the limit than Lewis, I think, at the moment in these cars. So I think Charles may have pipped him anyway. But yes, engine deployment issues for Lewis, but Charles to get podium, amazing. He held on clearly in the slower car overall. Just look at the qualifying pace. He is such a sharp operator. Yes, he got lucky going past George when George had the problem, but he got past Lewis. Looks like they might have kissed a little bit slightly with the wheels. He's worried about a puncture, but those two have huge respect for each other. Maybe there's a more serious coming together over the next few races, but I hope they do continue to be able to race, because I think it gives both of them enjoyment and makes both not feel deflated by team orders, which I don't think would work mentally for either of those drivers to get the best out of them week to week. The only other point I had on Ferrari was Lewis maybe burnt his tyres up when he came out and was in that scrap and Charles was lurking in the background. When Lewis's were ahead with George, I thought possibly. The only other point to point out was maybe burning up tyres when Lewis was quite close to Piastri still, but he dropped behind the second to 1.1 seconds, couldn't get that extra megajoule. They've dropped it to 8.5 now, haven't they, from 9, but he couldn't get that extra half a megajoule of power, and ultimately was toast, and I thought possibly was burning up his tyres more. But they were 5 laps younger than those around him, so that's not great. Sounds like the engine deployment issue was the main reason, that they're briefing anyway for the lack of pace. When we come on to the interesting story, I think, which is Pierre Gasly, who only finished 7 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton. And extraordinary. Alpine have been strong. They got the Mercedes power unit, as I said. And Gasly is putting in very reliable performances for Alpine, who finished rock bottom last year. And I guess Ferrari might need to be a little worried, because if Alpine make a big jump soon and can get their aero better with that engine design, and Ferrari don't make the leap forward, Will we start to see Gasly and that Alpine team be able to challenge further forward? Will be interesting to see. Hugely impressive. Reminds me of that Pierre Gasly season where he was incredible for the Red Bull second team, whatever it was called then, the current Racing Bulls team. And he had a truly remarkable performance, but Helmut Marko still didn't want to put him back in a Red Bull proper, and he ultimately left. So, yeah, I think buoying for Alpine to see that. And Bortoletto, again, we got unlucky with the safety car, but he looked solidly going before then, of course, involved in the incident with Bearman. But overall, positives there for Alpine, particularly compared to some of their rivals. We'll quickly touch on Red Bull first. Max got the pass on Hadjar early on, was trying to get past Gasly for a lot of the race, did get past Gasly at certain points. He's really not happy, and it looks like he might be briefing that he wants a break from the sport, and he's not enjoying the regs. And we'll come on to the reg discussion later. There's a little bit which is, if you're at the front, you wouldn't be saying this, of course. I think there's an element of truth to that. I'm not sure how cohesive that Red Bull garage is at the moment. And he's got a kid. He's enjoyed doing his other racing at the Nürburgring, the two-door racer that he was in, where they got disqualified, by the way, for an extra set of tyres, I think, that they used. He was racing for Mercedes in that event. But he's clearly starting to see that there are other interests for him, and I do wonder if he'll leave. I think it's quite possible. He's quite stubborn, and if he's saying this, I imagine he stubbornly might leave. But there do need to be tweaks to the engine rules. I think now an agreement on that. But I am very excited by the fact that the cars can follow one another close behind, because we haven't had that properly for many, many, many years. On the other teams, okay, Williams, real losers from the weekend. Albon actually did a test running program. That's how bad it was, just to try and get some more test data. Overweight, need to find some more aero and loads to put on the car as well. Audi, yeah, I think can be reasonably happy, but they'll want to make steps forward, and I think Racing Bulls have probably got a little bit on them at the moment, so we'll want to compete with them. Cadillac, again, they're a new team. They're not getting points, but they're a new team and they're not last. Williams are dead last, so got to see that as a bonus for Cadillac, particularly when you think about how much development Williams put into this. That was what they were briefing. That's why they managed to attract Carlos Sainz. And it's only a matter of time before that friction where they keep finishing last and there really isn't a good car there starts to boil over, and you see really frustrated drivers. And you saw that with Albon on the Saturday when his engineer said, after he'd been asked a question about where he was slower to Sainz, and he said, "You probably know already." And Albon remarked, "Oh, of course, it's probably my driving style." So clearly some friction behind the scenes there. The difference between the two drivers playing out and the speeds, but their car and their setup's a bit of a mess. So last year I was praising James Vowles hugely for the leadership in that team, but got to look realistically at the moment. It is not going well. There has got to be real questions asked of why they are so far back. And who else was really far back but Aston Martin? Stroll obviously retired with the issue, and Alonso was nowhere. It's the end of Alonso's career, really, I think, now, after this, which is a shame. It would have been nice for him to have another competitive car and had another go at really being able to win races. But I think he's at an age, and other top teams have not been interested in him for a long time. Yes, there might be some changes at Aston Martin, the structure. Jonathan Wheatley, of course, left Audi, and there are rumours that he'd be going to Aston Martin. There are rumours that Christian Horner was trying to go there, but was blocked by Adrian Newey. We'll see. And I'm not really sure how they pull themselves out of this mess, Aston Martin. And same for Williams, when you start this far behind on the development curve. So the last thing to touch on is the regs. Lando said he overtook Lewis Hamilton without even wanting to, and this is when he got immediately past again. So, but the way the engine deployed, you're at the mercy of the engine deploying, and breezed past him. It's not the late braking manoeuvre. Around the outside manoeuvres we got today are pretty impressive, but when it's breezed past on the straight and you have the huge overspeed, doesn't feel like racing to me. But it's that balance, right? And there will be tweaks. We're very early on. They do need to make changes to the regs to make the racing better for the drivers and for the fans. And they'll find that balance and they will make changes. But how much of it is hard limited into the engines they have, I don't know. I do want to see the cars going at incredible speeds and really quick lap times. Why? Because I think you see the greatest separation in the stand of the drivers. When the cars are new regs and are a bit slower, the middle F1 drivers are able to perform and look like they're close to the top drivers. But when you have the real speed, the incredibly quick cars, it's very telling who the best drivers are. So, Japan, a success. I really want to go. I'd love to go to Suzuka. I think not as exciting as the last Grand Prix overall, but we had some change and it's definitely been very interesting for the championship. And we've got a short break, time to recuperate ourselves after only 3 races. Incredible, really. And the teams, most of all, will be looking at how they can maximize the cars going into the next races. Apparently, a lot of the upgrades are, of course, predetermined, so the lack of 2 races hasn't necessarily changed the schedule for upgrades for a lot of teams. But it's definitely an opportunity for the gap to close to Mercedes at the top, and those other Mercedes-powered units in Alpine, in McLaren, are worrying for Ferrari, who may have been kicked off the second place perch. Marshals, it's been lovely coming to you again this week for the Japanese Grand Prix. I'm going to wave you goodbye like Max Verstappen did to Pierre Gasly. I will catch you next time in May.